What makes a good lens for stop motion? Well, this lens makes a good lens for stop motion, and I'm going to tell you why. Whether you're looking for a new DSLR or you're just looking to upgrade your current setup, you cannot deny the need for a lens. Obviously, if you're using a webcam, you don't need a lens, but I assume if you clicked on this video, that means that you use a DSLR to animate your stop motions, just like I do. But what makes a lens good for stop motion? You got your fisheye lens, your wide angle lens, your prime lens, all kinds of lenses out there, right? What makes a good lens for stop motion? Well, this lens makes a good lens for stop motion, and I'm going to tell you why. First though, 3 things you need to look for when you're looking to get a new lens for your camera for stop motion. First thing is, it needs to be almost completely manual. Focus, aperture, both of those things, okay? So manual focus means you can turn the focus ring by yourself, completely independent of the camera on manual. Second, manual aperture ring. The aperture ring needs to be manual as well. That's my preference. You don't necessarily have to have it that way. Softwares like Dragon Frame will control your aperture digitally, but I found that causes shadow play or light flicker. Thirdly, it's not quite as important, but you do want some zoom. You know, you want a little bit of a zoom to zoom into things and back out, you know, a little bit of play there, so that way you can just have a better experience doing stop motion, really. You don't have to be stuck with one focal length, but some lenses can be super expensive. You know, obviously no one really wants to pay $14,000 for a new lens, so I'd recommend looking at eBay for getting old lenses, like this one. Got this on eBay. Now, with all this out of the way, let me show you the one I use, this lens right here, and let me tell you why I like it so much. First of all, it's a Nikon AF 28 to 105 millimeter lens. This is a zoom lens. The widest angle is 28 millimeters, and the most zoomed in it can be is 105 millimeters. It's got a manual aperture ring, manual focus, and the best part about this lens, it's got a macro mode. When you zoom into 50 millimeters on the lens, you can access an extra, almost half another throw of the focus ring and get even closer in the focal length. It's super awesome. I mean, yeah. It was not the original reason I bought the lens, but after using it for a long time, I really like that feature. It's so handy. This is a film lens, okay, for a film camera. This lens is older than I am. Originally, it had autofocus, but the autofocus in the old film cameras were provided by the camera. New lenses have autofocus motors in the actual lens themselves. This does not have a autofocus motor within the camera body itself, so it will not do autofocus. So even if you wanted to go out in the field and do like usual photography, it's not that great of a lens for that, because unless you're really good at manually focusing, it takes forever. If any of these words don't make sense to you, aperture, you know, look that up. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there to tell you what aperture is. So with a manual aperture ring, you can manually control the f-stop. The minimum on mine appears to be 3.5, although I think there's one click past that, so it might be like 2.8. I'm not for sure. The farthest it can close is 22 on the f-stop. So 22 is going to give you a darker image, but more in focus, and 2.8 or 3.5 is going to give you a really bright image, but very little in focus. And very little in focus is what people like in cinema, and I like it as well. So that's one reason I bought this. That way I could control it manually by myself anytime I wanted, and it's awesome for stop motion. So with a manual aperture ring and a manual focus, you get pretty much no light flicker or shadow play from the camera, which is really good. It's really nice to get rid of light flicker. It bothers me so much. So even though 28 to 105 millimeter is not the biggest zoom in the world, it really is nothing to laugh at, and honestly, it's perfect for my application. It's still small and not too big and clumsy as a ginormous, you know, 250, 350. You can still take this out in the field and take pictures and not have to worry about banging it against something all the time, because it's not too big. It's still small and compact. Now, it really is perfect for what I do, but there are some drawbacks, and let me tell you. First, you can use this lens on any sort of camera you want, as long as there's an adapter ring to adapt a Nikkor lens to whatever camera you use. I would honestly recommend using this lens with a Canon EOS R camera. That way the camera and the lens won't ever talk to each other and won't ever make any sort of changes unless you do it yourself. And that is preferable in stop motion. But I don't have a Canon camera. I use a Nikon D5200. This is a great camera. It's got a 24, 26 megapixel sensor. It takes awesome pictures in RAW, almost 4K, I would say. I mean, honestly, it's not rated at 4K, but it might as well be. The picture quality is just so good in RAW. It's got a pretty good auto, not very good processing like most modern cameras would have, but for stop motion purposes, it's excellent, and it still takes pretty good video and stuff too. No image stabilization, but that's old cameras like this help us fine-tune photography abilities and make us not rely so much on all the new computer camera stuff, which is great. But you know, there's something to say if you can use an old film camera the same way you can use a brand new camera. It just shows that you care about photography. So when I first got this lens, I got it for the manual aperture control, and I was really hoping that it would just work when I screwed it on for the first time. Well, it didn't. You have to have it in manual mode for starters, which is pretty much what I was going to do anyway, so it didn't really matter. To my extreme surprise and displeasure, aperture still worked and was still automatically being controlled by the camera, which is great for, like I said, out in the field, but it's not good for stop motion. So I was kind of disappointed. It really defeated the purpose of me buying it, but all was not lost. I did a little bit of research and experimentation, and I found a guy on a forum who put masking tape over the contacts of the lens so the camera and the lens no longer communicated with each other. Put tape on it, and it worked like a charm. It really is a great fix for it. I had previously learned that you could not screw the lens on all the way and it would still work. I do not recommend this though, because obviously if it's not screwed on the way, it can just fall off, and that would be terrible. As robust as this seems, it can still break, and that would just be awful. And after this point, the tape has caused no damage at all to anything in the camera or the lens, so I would highly recommend you do that, I guess. As weird as it sounds. This is a very good lens. It feels quality in your hand. So like I said, guys, I bought this on eBay. It was $130, and honestly, that is such a good deal for a lens. Just, you know, get on eBay, look at some of the lenses. There's lots of options. I mean, if you can find one just like this, I would buy it. This is a great lens for stop motion as long as you're using a Nikon camera or you have an adapter for Nikkor lenses. It's made in Japan. If you're just looking at all lenses in general, I really don't think you can beat the quality of a Nikon lens. There's just very little barreling at all whenever you zoom in all the way. There's very little image distortion. It is a phenomenal lens, and I would highly recommend it. So that'll wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I really hope you found it informative and helpful. If you guys have any questions at all, put them in the comments below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I'll see you next time at Dynamic Productions. As always, keep animating.